In 2020, there was the Slick Boy Scarab. In 2005, there was the Simple Boy Scarab. And in 2003, there was the Chonk Bonk Metal Boy Scarab. All three generations of Scarab coming together to create the greatest Necron Scarab swarm this galaxy has ever seen. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle. I have a huge Necron army, it's what I started the game with. My first ever purchase was a box of Necron Warriors way back in 2013 as my first 40k anything. Nowadays, most of my army is now painted, but one thing that is still missing is the Scarabs. Oh, the Scarab swarms. What am I gonna do with you? I have so many Necron Scarab swarms. And this really does come from a poor decision by Little Child J, because this was my early days of collecting Necrons. I didn't have a lot of models, I didn't have a lot of money, and I wanted the most bang for my buck. 3 Necron Scarab swarms came with each box of warriors, and I had 8 boxes of warriors, 80 warriors. So that's a lot of Scarab swarms, but I wasn't satisfied with just that. I thought 4 Scarab swarms to a base. I don't know about that. If I do 3 per base, I could have a lot more Scarab swarms. If I do 2 on some of the bases and just let them kind of fill in the sides, I could have so many Scarab swarms. But more isn't always better. Now, in my old age, I actually feel like having an appropriate number of very, very nice Scarab swarm bases would be much preferable to like 40. That is entirely too many. Sure, it might be fun to bring in like 1 Apocalypse game, but I don't like models filling up my drawers never being played with. I want everything to see table time. And I think if I paint just a few very, very nice bases, that will be much more fun. There's something a little bit magical about the classic old metal pewter Necron Scarab swarms. Something about that old school Necron design. A little bit before they were space Egyptians, they were space James Cameron Terminators, with a little bit of a bug thing going on. They're a little bit meaner, a little bit angrier, and they're a little bit spikier. This thing doesn't look like a particularly sophisticated looking weapon, but it does look particularly dangerous. Its multi-jointed limbs and big grasping talons are still very frightening, and one very interesting feature is it had wings. I will miss this little Scarab swarm, but I totally see why it only lasted a little while. They totally went in a different direction with the Necrons, and I think it was probably for the best. In 2005, we saw our first plastic Necron Scarab swarms. This is the Necron Scarab that I grew up knowing and loving, and it is super, super cute and absolutely teeny tiny. I love this guy for what it is. And I don't know if it was the limit of manufacturing of plastic models or if it was just a failure of imagination, but it is a very, very simple design. It's not particularly unique. It looked all right, especially next to the old metal Necron Spider, which was just a scaled up version of this little Scarab. That's when they looked pretty darn good. But this thing sitting next to the new Necron Spider that looks like a proper arachnid, it looks a little dated. These guys came 4 to a 40mm base, and they had a hilariously bad flying stand. It looked like a little half of a raspberry with a stem sticking up, and then this little guy was put on top. It did kind of do a cool thing where it looked like they were flying over the ground, and I don't think I ever used those. I think I always glued them down to the base like they were scuttering across the floor, or I took some wire and I bent it so that they were kind of flying high up in the air. That's how I liked my Scarab swarms. But you know what? This was all we had. This is all I knew, and I thought it looked great. This was the Scarab swarm that we had for 15 years. But then I think that they have probably been displaced. Sometimes you don't know what you really want until you see it, and these Necron Scarab swarms are clearly the absolute best. These models made their debut in the Indominus box, and they are hella cool. They're super detailed. They're way more detailed than the old 2005 version. Really what these are is if you looked at the 2005 under a microscope so that you could see all the fun details, these would be the fun details. Even the undersides have a little bit of detail going on. You're never gonna see it, but they did it. I really like these guys. They have individual legs. They have a really cool Necron energy ball in the middle. Good old-fashioned Necron energy balls. And one really, really cool thing about them is they come in all sorts of different sizes. If you looked at the old Spider, you would actually see underneath its belly that it had a bunch of tiny little 2005 Scarabs. And they were really small, and that was an interesting idea, but they only had those two sizes, normal and small. These guys come in all sorts of different sizes. None of them are exactly the same, and I think that's a really fun idea. I can just imagine a crazy swarm of these things, and some of them are so small they go right into your mouth, but some of them are like as big as dogs. These are really cool, and they're a little scarier and a little nastier. I really like the modern 2020 Necron Scarab. Luckily for me, I already went ahead and I decorated all of my bases. Some of these are in my classic old school Necron blue and white color scheme, but a lot of these I decorated for the big old video where I repainted all of my Necrons. Never got around to actually doing the Scarab Swarms, but the work is already done. Now that I have everything organized in front of me, I think I am going to do 3 squads of 6. I think that should be more than enough, and I can always come back later if I want to build some more. I have plenty of Scarab Swarms. I'm also going to do everything I can to give them a little bit of height. They're a little bit awkward to pick up when they're really flat. If I just put a few on top of a base, then I have to go in and pick up just the sides of the base. But if they've got a little bit of height, I can go in there and really manhandle them. So it's time to break out the glue and start putting some Necron Scarabs on some bases. To get these guys to stay stuck to the bases, they're going to need a little bit of putty. Green stuff. I mixed the two halves together until it was a nice shade of orc green. This between the scarabs and the base will create a lot more surface area for the glue to stick to. I put a drop of glue on the scarabs and a drop on the green stuff. Then I squished it down onto the base. I did this over and over until it was completely covered in scarabs. Want to see a magic trick? Boom! Finished in the blink of an eye. I have 2 bases covered in scarabs, and I think I have my strat down pat. I'm gonna blanket each base with the 2005 scarabs because I have the most of them and because they probably look the worst. And then I'm going to selectively apply my Indomitus scarabs to the top. And the nice thing is that these are kind of in chunks, so it'll help to look like they're flying. And then at the very end, I will very carefully and selectively apply my pride and joy, the old metal scarabs. Whew, it's gonna take a lot of green stuff, and this is all I got. So this is gonna have to do. We'll see. This was quite a process to stick down every scarab. I was so happy I decided to only do 3 squads, not 100. It could have been a lot worse. Whew. All 18 scarab swarms are done, and it took a lot more scarabs than I thought it would. And there is so much super glue on my fingers, it hurts. But they're all on there, they're looking pretty good, and it's time now for the Indomitus scarabs. The Indomitus scarabs sat very nicely on top. I clipped off the pegs they came with and glued them down. They really add some nice height, and helped sell that not only are they scuttling across the ground, but also floating through the air. I've been dreading this moment. It's time to glue on the metal scarabs, and I feel a twinge of doubt, or maybe guilt. It's hard when you've been holding on to bits for so long and they're so important and interesting and they have such a history. Is this how I want to use them up? And this was a bad habit I've had for a long time. I have a lot of very boring looking Space Marines. I would hold on to all of those pieces, waiting for the perfect project to come along to use them on, but it would never come because it's not a logical thing, it's just hoarding. And I've learned to push past it. This is the perfect project to use these Necron Scarabs on because it exists, it's here, it's in front of me, I'm doing it now. And you know what? I will enjoy it and I will love it. No second thoughts. The metal scarabs were fun to sprinkle here and there. I wish I had more. They don't fit well with the new ones, but once they're all painted, they should blend in nicely. And the eagle-eyed among my opponents will get a kick out of these old pewter beauties. Boom, 18 scarab swarms built. I'm done, right? Nope, painting, the best part. It's time to get a little bit of paint on these models, and famous last words, but I think this is gonna be a pretty quick and easy paint job. I can do 90% of the work with an airbrush and then just throw on some sort of a wash paint. let's see how it goes. I primed the models black, which might seem strange for a white Necron color scheme, but it'll all make sense in the end. In my haste to get them all primed up, I blasted them from all directions, and that meant that the primer really built up pretty thick, and so it's taking a little while to dry. But I'm still on course for a quick paint job. The first step to painting my white Necrons is an airbrushing of some P3 Iron Hull Gray. This is just a fast and loose spray of a base coat. I left a little black on the bottom to become my shadows. These Scarab models were a little old, but you know what is super fresh? That's right, the Eons of Battle Patreon. If you like our videos, the best way to support us is by becoming a member of our Patreon. Over there, you'll gain access to some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live on YouTube, a live hobby hangout every week, and more. With that said, it's time to scuttle back to the bases. After that, I did a more targeted spray of some Games Workshop Fenrisian Gray, which is a light blue-gray color. This will help me transition from the gray to pure white. I just did a quick dot of this on the body of each Scarab. And finally, pure white. I was very careful with this to only highlight the middle of each Scarab. I wanted a nice gradient on each little fella. Ah, they look so cool now. It really, having them all painted up really blends them all together, and even though they all had different paint and different sizes and different colors and some were metal, they all look like proper Scarab swarms now. At this point, I need to give them a wash, but I am so lazy that I do not want to try to get in every nook and cranny with a brush. So I'm gonna be using a technique I pioneered with this Necron army. I'm gonna take some Nuln Oil wash, throw it in my airbrush, and just douse them. I love quick and dirty stuff like this. I literally sprayed a big wet coat of Games Workshop Nuln Oil, and then really quickly took a damp brush and pulled it away from the top of each Scarab. This only took a few seconds each. If I did this manually with a brush, it would have taken forever. You lose a little bit more paint this way, but you gain back so much time. Then for the eyes, I did a little airbrush OSL using my finest airbrush with the finest needle size. A little bit of red ink goes through the airbrush like water. I almost didn't need to pull back on the trigger for it to flow out. Just a quick squirt for each eye. Unfortunately, not everything can be airbrushed. I pulled back out the brushes to highlight the eyes with some red. Then a small dot of orange paint, and then an even smaller drop of yellow paint. Then the models were finished, but the bases were not. I put a little bit of Vallejo Dark Sand watered down to all of the exposed base. Oh, so much finicky base coating. It's like I glued down a whole bunch of Skittles to the bases and now I gotta paint around them. But you know what? Sometimes there's no better way, you just gotta do it. With the dark sand applied, I took some red pigment powders and gave each base a rubbin'. This will stick down into all the nooks and crannies and give them a nice otherworldly orange glow. Then, last but not least, I broke out the grass tufts. I like my Necrons to have a lot of interest on the base, so I threw a lot of tufts all around my swarm. I used red, brown, and these tiny little beige tufts. These Necron Scarabs are just about done, and it is time to, say it with me now, paint the rim of the base gray. That's right, I paint my Necron base rims gray. There's a lot of black on the models, it's one of my accent colors, and so I actually like to use a gray so that the rim of the base does not conflict with the black on the models. 2 thin coats later, and these Necron Scarabs were complete. Holy cow, that was a lot of very repetitive painting tasks. Painting those eyes was an hour of just dotting with a big old paintbrush. But it was worth it. Look at these little fellas. I think quality was the right choice over quantity. These guys look like they would make some excellent harassing units. They are so cheap and super fast. I can use these to give me some options in games and to take them away from my opponents. These little fellas are fast with a movement characteristic of 10. I remember bringing these guys in my Necron lists way back in the day. I can see it now. If I want to keep those orc knobs away from my Necron warriors for at least another turn or two, I can throw these bad boys into the fight. They get a good number of attacks at 4, but only hit 50% of the time. But they have a special rule where their 6s auto wound. Not bad, that could kill some orcs, and it's a very healthy number of 6s. Not an incredible damage dealer, but that's not really the point. I want to delay my enemy, and at 4 wounds apiece, they have a chance of sticking around. Then the real fun begins with a stratagem called Self-Destruct. For 1 command point on a 2-up, a Scarab Swarm can explode for D3 mortal wounds. Or on a 6, it's just a straight 3 mortal wounds. That last little Necron Scarab probably won't do much damage by himself, but if it self-destructs, rolling a D3 and it's a 3. It has a really good chance of taking some orcs down with it. The plastic that makes up these Necron Scarabs has seen a lot of action. Back in the good old days of 6th edition and 7th edition, I took Necron Scarabs in probably every single Necron list. And you know what? They're here sitting in front of me. I have the 9th edition BRB, the big rule book. I have the 9th edition Necron Codex. There is nothing stopping me. I gotta get some games in. It's a very special feeling being able to put a period on models this old. I've been staring at these Necron Scarabs for my entire wargaming career, and now they are completely finished. Nothing left to do now but get them in a game. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any models that you've been hanging on to forever, and they're waiting for those final touches. But that's this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and now it's time for the real star of the show, this week's EOB Complete submissions. We put out a challenge to our community to send us before and after photos of their recently finished models to be immortalized in our videos. If you want to join in the fun, you can submit a before and after photo of your painted mini to our Discord server, which you can find in the description below, or you can post it to Instagram with the hashtag EOBComplete. Without further ado, let's look at and get inspired by what the folks have finished this week. An Iron Hands Deathwatch Marine by Bluevin Cheese, an Assault Intercessor by Benj, a Primaris Bladeguard Ancient by Tenastus, a Space Marine with Rocket Launcher by Scottbot, Morgath's Blade Coven by It's Tabby Time, a Dapper Kingpin by Silverclaw, a Bladeguard Veteran by Ramy22, a Headless Horseman by Alex Rider123, some Old School Terminators by Kinda Worry, a Sailor Moon by Sparkle Squid, some custom Necron Cryptothralls by Civilian Waffles, a Kragnos by Quentin Quire, an Orc War Mumak by Rekkies, a fun little abomination by Bastion Red L, a Primaris Apothecary by Justice Bell, some Custodian Guard by Jimmel Kodal, a Baby Yoda by Sakuretsu, a Gaunt's Ghost Team by Just Make Stuff, a Soldier by Strange, a Bladeguard Ancient by Vestriel, a Big Necron Warrior by Wolfstring, some Roman Soldiers by Sir Knight Jones, a Primaris Dark Angel Chaplain by Pyrite, a Nurgle Plague Marine by Zero, and a Tau Stealth Suit by Smoking Killiz. Congratulations to everyone for a job well done. It's no small feat to get paint on minis, and you all should feel really proud. Nothing gets the hobby juices flowing like finishing a project, and we all thank you for sharing your work, motivating us and the hobby community to paint our plastic. Thanks for sharing.